Entitled passenger trashes my car on camera. Even though Uber tells riders when a driver has cams installed in the car for safety, this guy decided he was not okay with it and ordered me to either shut the camera off or end the ride. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. That just made him angrier, so he decided to throw his drink all over me and my car. But he found out the hard way that Uber protects their drivers from guys like him, so things wound up working out way worse for him than expected. I drive for Uber in the Dallas area. One night, I received a ride request and picked up the gentleman for a pretty decent ride. About 5 minutes in, the rider asked me what was on my rearview mirror. I told him it was my interior cam. He got mad and told me to turn it off because he didn't like such surveillance. I reminded him that the Uber app would have said the ride was being recorded. There are also signs on the door of my car. He could have declined booking the trip if there was a problem. Things escalated when he yelled, "You better turn that dang thing off, or else!" "Or else?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Turn it off or stop this trip." I verified his request, and he said, "Yes, turn the dang thing off or end this trip." So I said, "Fine, have it your way. I will comply." At that, I exited the highway and pulled into a convenience store. He acted a bit stunned before shouting, "What the heck are you doing?" I calmly stated, "You said either I stop recording or I end the trip. As I have no intention of stopping the recording, I am letting you out here." That did not go over well with him. He started screaming and hurling vituperative language beginning with the letter F. He was questioning my parentage and, although correctly guessing my romantic orientation, was rather rude about it. I calmly ended the trip as per his request. That was the compliance. Here's the maliciousness. When ending the trip on the app, I gave him a 1-star rating, as we can't give 0. As he really was getting on my last nerve, I added feeling unsafe and aggressive rider. As he continued to rant, I pointed to a police car that just pulled in and told him, "If you don't leave my car immediately, then perhaps you might want to explain why not to that nice officer." After getting in a few more cutting jabs and getting out of the car, he tossed his open protein drink at my head, hitting the headrest and spilling all over the floorboard. It was about that time I got a text message from Uber support asking if I was all right. I said I was. They told me his account was suspended and asked if I could send the video clip of him. I said I would, and also mentioned the mess. Uber support told me to just send them a picture, and he would be charged a $75 cleaning fee, which I got within an hour. So I did exactly what the rider wanted, but due to his petulant behavior, he got a canceled Uber account and it cost him $75. If he would have just left, I wouldn't have done a thing. But play stupid games, win stupid prizes. First things first, this original poster needs to calm down a bit. It's nice that you know the word vituperative, but don't act like that's a word that springs to mind while you're being yelled at in the car. I'm trying to read horrible stories about your troubled personal life, not expand my vocabulary. That aside, let's take a moment to appreciate that this guy threw a drink at OP and missed from probably just a foot or two away. Either he's got a terrible arm, or he was seriously that worked up over a stupid camera. And what he should have considered is that guys like him are exactly why OP has that camera in the first place. He knew he was being recorded, and he still trashed OP's car without thinking about the consequences. If OP didn't have that video of this guy throwing drinks around, his account probably wouldn't have stayed suspended for very long. He definitely wouldn't have had to pay $75 on top of being stranded. This man didn't just deserve what happened to him, but he pretty much just did it to himself. That's when you know malicious compliance stories are at their best. Daft mom blames a children's entertainer because her daughter's a thief. This happened 9 years ago. I used to work at a camp as a children's entertainer. One day we had this girl come join us for archery. You had to pay €10 to join the archery activity. We had one dude come over to teach it, while my job was to basically babysit the kids, which is 90% of that job anyway, so that's all fine and well. Now, this girl would not listen to me or the archery dude. Whenever we said, wait until everyone has shot all their arrows and then go pick up your arrows, she would just shoot her arrows and immediately get them while the other kids were still shooting. This is obviously very dangerous. After warning her multiple times, I decided that enough was enough and I told her to leave the activity. Fast forward a couple of hours, I just finished another activity and I see her and her mom coming towards me. Now, I've seen this before. Generally, the mom asks, Now what do you say? The kid meekly says, sorry. What? The mom usually asks. I can't hear you. Followed by the kid sighing, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case here. It was the opposite. The mom wanted me to apologize to her daughter, and then also give her money back, neither of which was obviously going to happen. But it gets worse. Apparently, this girl stole 50 euros from her mom's purse. She decided to pay for her archery thing at the service desk, and with the leftover 40 euros, she went to the shop and bought 40 euros worth of candy. And the mom wasn't mad at her, she was mad at us for allowing her to buy that much candy and buy a ticket to the archery thing without her mom's permission. It was all our fault. So we all came together and decided that if this was how the mother felt, the daughter would not be allowed to do anything without her mom's permission. Going to buy some bread at the little shop in the morning? Better get your mom. Want to join the arts and crafts hour? Not without your mom's permission. Want to pay €1 deposit on a locker for the swimming pool? Nope. They quickly tried to backtrack, but we didn't. The mom had to constantly supervise her daughter, which means she was also witnessing all her bad behavior. It was still all our fault, though. I'm really curious about how old this girl was. Old enough to wield a bow and arrow, but young enough to spend insane amounts of money on candy? This feels relevant to OP's story because she's either firmly headed down the wrong path, or she's at risk of heading that way if her mom keeps enabling her poor behavior. And that's exactly what this mom is doing by blaming everyone else for her daughter's actions. Stealing from her mom's purse might not be unusual if she's a certain age. It's not good, and it obviously needs to be corrected. I just don't want to assume that the girl is fully entitled if she might just be practicing learned behaviors. This is why parents need to punish their kids, even if they think it's wrong. Otherwise, this girl will never learn. She'll just keep doing whatever she wants because she knows her mom will blame someone else for it. If she'd been raised just a little better, she could be enjoying her camping trip. Instead, she's saddled to her pain of a mother because they both need to be taught a lesson. But I don't even know if there's a better way to handle it. What would you do in this situation? Leave us a comment and let us know. Smug employer shreds my resume right in front of me during the interview. This happened about a decade ago, when I first started looking to leave the bank I was then working for. I felt I had hit my ceiling there. Plus, the daily commute to the office was a pain. So I started looking for roles in my area of expertise a bit closer to home, and found one for a local medium-sized building society. I applied immediately. Coming from a Big Four bank, I spoke bankese like the veteran I was, aced all the online skills and psychometric tests, and knocked my phone interview for 6. A few days later, I got an email invite for a final face-to-face interview with the manager who I would be reporting to if I was hired. With a time and date booked in, I prepared some answers for questions I thought I'd be asked. Name a time you went above and beyond, and things like that. Then I counted down the days. The day arrived, and about an hour before my appointment, I received an email from the manager himself. Let's call him Dave. He said he was looking forward to our face-to-face to get to know me and get a feel for me as a person. He said to please bring a hard copy of my cover letter and resume to the meeting. Thankfully, I hadn't left home yet, so I quickly printed off a copy of each and ran out the door. I got to the head office of the building society and let the receptionist know I was there to have an interview with Dave. About 5 minutes later, Dave appeared. He was all smiles as he shook my hand and ushered me into his office. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Dave asked me if I had any questions before we began. A mentor of mine at the time told me that if presented with an opportunity to ask questions in an interview, a good go-to question is, what's the work culture like here between reporting lines? Do you have an open door policy if people have questions or need help? So I asked that. Dave seemed to take a moment before responding. We have an open door policy. The front door is always open if you don't like it here. He laughed. In the moment, I kind of didn't know what to do, so I laughed as well, thinking it might have just been his sense of humor. Before I could ask anything else, let alone a clarifying question, Dave asked me for my cover letter and resume. I passed them over to him, and he started flipping through the pages. He then asked me a question I was expecting. Can you tell me a time you went above and beyond to achieve a goal? I gave an answer. Dave's face didn't change as he nodded and kept fiddling with my cover letter and resume. Dave then asked me another question. Give me an example of a time you had conflicting priorities from different stakeholders. How did you prioritize and resolve the conflict? I began to answer as Dave swung his chair to the left and fed my cover letter into a shredder next to his desk before looking back at me. I was kind of shocked. I'd never seen someone do that in an interview before, so I kind of stammered. Dave motioned with his hand for me to keep going, so I started my answer again. I got a few more words out before he fed the first page of my resume into the shredder, then again looked back at me. I stopped trying to answer the question and asked, "What are you doing? Is this some kind of test?" Dave grinned at that and replied, "I'm just trying to see how you react to being thrown a curveball. So far, it's not looking promising." I figured this guy was just messing with me, and if this is how he treats people in an interview, he must be one huge wang as a boss. So I decided to leave. As I stood up, I said, "Thank you for your time, Dave, but I think I'm going to take you up on your open door policy." He looked a bit puzzled and asked, "What do you mean?" I replied, "I hear the front door is always open if I don't like it here." And then I left. A few days later, I asked my mentor what she thought of the interview. She said it sounded like he'd been to some middle management corporate consultant retreat where he was told that it was a good way to test people for resilience. But that sure seemed like a BS way to her. Or he just enjoyed going on power trips. Either way, she said I did the best thing by walking out. This OP absolutely did the right thing by walking out. There are plenty of ways to test your employees. In fact, Dave was already doing that with the questions he was asking. But he was so focused on playing mind games, he probably wasn't even listening to the answers. And the best part is that when he was thrown a curveball by OP leaving, he was totally shocked by it. Why tell someone they're not handling surprises well if you can't handle them yourself? It doesn't matter whether this guy was taught this curveball approach or not, he's still a jerk for using it. I can't imagine going to work every day with a boss who thinks it's better to test you in useless ways than to simply monitor your skills on the actual job you're applying for. No money is worth putting up with that. Uptight boss threatens my job because he doesn't like my kilt. This was a few years back. I worked in a design firm, and I was lucky to have my own office, as this was a fairly small company of just 11 people. I am of Scottish origins, and I am a lifelong kilt wearer. I'd managed to make the case to the company about letting me wear my kilts to work, as I would continue to dress professionally and basically not make a fool of anyone. They knew my work ethic and my professionalism, or so I thought. This went on for a couple of years, until one time there was this sort of fancy company dinner. It wasn't really a black tie sort of event, but we were expected to attend very well-dressed in formal attire. Coat, ties, the works. So I sent an email detailing how this would be a great opportunity to show the dressier side of a kilt with all the trimmings. What followed took me by surprise, as one of the bosses came directly to my office and asked me not to wear the kilt, as it would be unprofessional. I reminded him that I had been wearing my kilt to work, I had interacted with clients, and my professionalism had never been in question by anyone. So I told him, thanks for the suggestion, but I will wear my kilt. It can be really dressy. He came back with, "Well, let me put it this way. If you show up with your kilt, you will put your position here in jeopardy. This dinner is not the time to wear a costume." I blew my lid off and had a nice back and forth with him about how a kilt is an article of clothing, not a costume, not a skirt, not anything extravagant, and finally, it is my cultural attire. So if you want to face an equal employment opportunity complaint for national origin discrimination, go ahead and threaten my job because you personally don't like my kilt. The tone changed immediately. No longer was I threatened with losing my job over a kilt, but the excuse now was that they would start keeping a close watch on what I do here. And that was enough for me. I showed up to the stupid dinner wearing vintage clothes. Obviously so, as in mid-1960s Scottish Harris tweed jacket, whale corduroy pants, a vintage 1950s woven necktie, and to top it off, I wore my 1930s paperboy hat. I looked dapper and dressed to the nines. Man, did I look good. Of course, that was not what the one boss was expecting, and he was visibly irritated. So much so that he called me for an aside and basically asked me what the heck I was wearing. I told him this was my formal attire, my dude. This is how I dress. I love vintage British style, so I wore it since you objected to my kilt. He was fuming the rest of the night. And by the way, no one else batted an eye. In fact, a couple of compliments were received. It was my way to say F you to the man. By the way, I continued wearing my kilt at work until I was there no more. It feels like so many of these malicious compliance stories start with bosses who don't understand that if something works, there's no need to change it. This OP's clients knew how he dressed, and they were okay with it. His coworkers were okay with it. His other bosses were okay with it. The idea that they'd suddenly have a problem with it at this one dinner makes no sense at all. If anyone considered OP's kilt to be unprofessional, then this issue would have come up a long time ago. It's perfectly fine, as long as he's wearing something underneath. But no, uptight bosses like to cause trouble where there isn't any. Usually the effects of their meddling are a lot worse than this. It sounds like OP was actually dressed pretty well, and probably looked great to everyone except this one boss who forgot that it wasn't a black tie event. In a lot of other malicious compliance stories, one boss's ignorance brings down the whole company. It's nice and kind of wholesome that in this case, all that happened was OP got to have fun at a party while dressed like a Scottish newsie. Granted, he probably could have just worn the kilts if everyone else was fine with it. But should he have risked it, or was his solution better? Leave a comment below and let us know what you'd do if you were in OP's shoes. Or, I guess I should say, brogues. Click on one of the videos you see on the screen now, or a Karen will sue you.